Think your fridge keeps everything fresh? Wrong. Some foods actually spoil faster and even become dangerous when stored cold. 8. Tomatoes. Tomatoes are one of the most misunderstood kitchen staples when it comes to storage. Many people instinctively place them in the refrigerator thinking it will help them last longer. But in reality, refrigeration damages the very qualities that make tomatoes worth eating in the first place. When tomatoes are chilled below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees Celsius, the cold temperature disrupts their delicate internal structures. The result? A noticeable change in texture, taste, and nutritional content. One of the most obvious effects is what's called chilling injury. It occurs when the cold damages the membranes inside the tomato, leading to a mealy or grainy texture, especially when the fruit is brought back to room temperature. That juicy, firm bite you expect from a fresh tomato turns mushy and lifeless. But the flavor changes are even more dramatic. Tomatoes owe their vibrant, sweet, slightly tangy taste to a variety of volatile compounds that are heat-sensitive and cold-intolerant. When tomatoes are stored in the refrigerator, the activity of the enzymes that help produce these compounds slows to a crawl. Once that happens, you lose the aroma and depth of flavor that make a ripe tomato so special. This transformation can begin within just 48 hours of refrigeration, and some of those flavor losses are irreversible, even if you bring the tomato back to room temperature. Nutritionally, refrigeration can also reduce the synthesis of lycopene, the antioxidant that gives tomatoes their red color and is known for supporting heart health and protecting against oxidative damage. Lycopene continues to develop post-harvest when tomatoes are stored properly at room temperature. But when chilled, that process is interrupted, resulting in less vibrant color and lower nutritional value. So what's the best way to store tomatoes? Keep them on the countertop at room temperature, stem side down, and out of direct sunlight. This positioning slows down moisture loss and prevents the stem scar from becoming a site for mold or spoilage. If a tomato becomes slightly overripe, it's okay to put it in the fridge for a day or two, but always allow it to return to room temperature before using. This helps restore some of the lost flavors, though not the original texture. And if you're dealing with cherry tomatoes, heirloom varieties, or anything especially delicate, keep them out of the fridge at all costs. Their higher sugar content and thinner skins make them even more prone to cold damage. 7. Bread. It seems logical at first. Pop your loaf of bread into the fridge to stop it from going moldy. But what most people don't realize is that the refrigerator is one of the worst places to store fresh bread, at least if you care about keeping it soft, moist, and flavorful. Here's why. Bread is made up of starch molecules that undergo changes when baked. During baking, starch granules absorb water and swell, creating that soft, airy structure we love. But once cooled, particularly in the cold environment of a refrigerator, those starches begin to retrograde, a process where the molecules recrystallize and squeeze out moisture. This accelerates staling, even if the bread isn't technically old. In fact, storing bread in the fridge can cause it to go stale up to 6 times faster than leaving it at room temperature. The loaf may remain mold-free a bit longer, but the cost is dry, tough slices that lack that fresh-baked feel. And for crusty breads like sourdough or ciabatta, refrigeration can completely destroy the exterior crispness and interior chew, leaving behind a rubbery disappointment. So what should you do instead? If you plan to finish your bread within 2 to 3 days, keep it at room temperature in a cool, dry area, ideally inside a bread box or in a paper bag to maintain the right humidity balance. This protects the crust from drying out while preventing mold from forming too quickly. For longer storage, freezing is far better than refrigerating. Slice the loaf beforehand, wrap it tightly in plastic or foil, and freeze. When you need a slice or two, just toast or warm them directly from frozen. This preserves both flavor and texture far more effectively than the fridge ever could. Preservative-free artisan loaves, like whole grain, rye, or baguettes, can be stored wrapped in a clean kitchen towel to help maintain crust integrity without trapping moisture. Just be sure to consume them quickly, as these breads tend to have shorter shelf lives than supermarket varieties. By understanding how cold temperatures affect starch, you can extend the shelf life of your bread without sacrificing freshness or taste. It's a small change with a big payoff in your daily meals. 6. Potatoes. On the surface, storing potatoes in the fridge might seem like a smart way to extend their shelf life, especially if you live in a warm climate. But in reality, cold storage can turn this humble staple into a nutritional misfire and a culinary disappointment. When raw potatoes are exposed to cold temperatures, typically below 45 degrees Fahrenheit 7 degrees Celsius, they undergo a transformation known as cold-induced sweetening. This is a natural defense mechanism where the starches in the potato convert into sugars in response to the cold. While it doesn't sound alarming, this shift creates a chain reaction of issues, both in the kitchen and in your health. Most noticeably, potatoes stored in the fridge tend to darken unevenly when cooked, particularly when fried or roasted. That's because the extra sugars caramelize too quickly, creating scorched edges and inconsistent coloring. More importantly, this reaction also increases the formation of acrylamide, a chemical compound that develops when high-sugar, starchy foods are cooked at high temperatures. Acrylamide is classified as a potential human carcinogen, and while occasional exposure is unavoidable in many cooked foods, refrigerating potatoes makes it more likely you'll get higher concentrations. Beyond chemistry, let's talk about taste. Cold sweetened potatoes often take on an oddly sweet and bitter flavor, which can ruin the balance of savory dishes. Mashed potatoes may taste subtly off, and baked potatoes can end up with a confusing texture, part mush, part grit. Even the humble French fry becomes unpredictable in flavor and texture when made from refrigerated potatoes. And let's not forget texture. Instead of becoming fluffy when cooked, chilled potatoes tend to turn dense or waxy, which is particularly disappointing when you're aiming for soft interiors or crispy exteriors. The ideal storage method? Keep potatoes in a cool, dry, dark place, a pantry, cellar, or cupboard away from heat sources. Use a paper bag, cardboard box, or basket to allow airflow while blocking light, which prevents greening and sprouting. Exposure to light causes the formation of solanine, a bitter compound that can be mildly toxic in large amounts, particularly for children or those with sensitivities. If you see green patches or sprouting, trim those areas before cooking. A few sprouts don't make the potato unsafe, but they're a sign you're reaching the end of its shelf life. And remember, potatoes and onions may look good side by side, but never store them together. The gases they release speed up spoilage in both. By avoiding the fridge, you're not only preserving the quality of your potatoes, you're protecting your recipes, your palate, and your health. 5. Onions. Onions are foundational to almost every savory dish, from stir-fries and stews to soups and roasts. But while they seem hardy and durable, onions are surprisingly sensitive to cold and humidity. Storing them in the refrigerator isn't just unnecessary. It actually ruins their structure and flavor faster than you think. Whole onions prefer cool, dry, and well-ventilated environments, not the damp chill of the fridge. When stored in cold, humid conditions, onions begin to absorb moisture through their papery skin, making the inner layers soggy and prone to mold and decay. It often starts in the center of the bulb, so you may not even realize the onion is spoiling until you slice it open, and by then, it's already compromised. Cold storage also dulls the onion's natural defense mechanisms. Onions contain sulfur compounds that give them their sharpness and protect against spoilage. But in the fridge, these compounds degrade more quickly, causing the onion to lose its bite and develop a mildly sweet or metallic taste, far from the bold flavor profile most recipes rely on. Another issue? Cross-contamination of odors. Onions are incredibly aromatic, and when placed in the fridge, their scent tends to seep into nearby foods, especially porous items like dairy, butter, or uncovered leftovers. This can leave your refrigerator smelling off and even affect the taste of other foods. So what's the best way to keep onions fresh? Store whole onions in a basket, mesh bag, or open bowl in a pantry or cabinet. Make sure they're kept in a dark, dry place with good air circulation. Avoid sealed plastic containers or bags, which trap moisture and speed up decay. Most whole onions will last 2 to 4 weeks this way, depending on the variety and storage conditions. If your onion has already been cut, the rules change. Once an onion is peeled or sliced, it needs to be wrapped tightly in plastic wrap or stored in an airtight glass container and kept in the fridge, but only for up to 7 days. Beyond that, the cut surface starts to degrade, and the onion can become slimy or bitter. Always label the date you stored it to avoid using it past its prime. And as with potatoes, don't store onions next to them. Both vegetables emit gases and moisture that accelerate spoilage in the other. Keeping onions out of the fridge isn't just a matter of tradition. It's a proven way to preserve flavor, prevent waste, and protect the integrity of your ingredients. If you've ever wondered why your onions felt mushy, tasted dull, or spoiled too fast, your fridge may be to blame. For basil, fresh basil might seem like it belongs in the refrigerator alongside other leafy herbs, but chilling this delicate plant is one of the fastest ways to destroy its aroma, texture, and vibrant color. Unlike sturdier herbs like parsley or thyme, basil is highly sensitive to cold temperatures, and storing it in the fridge can ruin its culinary value within a matter of hours. Basil originates from warmer climates and thrives in conditions that mimic those environments. When exposed to the typical 35 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit of most refrigerators, basil experiences cold shock, which damages its cell walls. This leads to wilting, blackened leaves, and rapid spoilage. You may notice that even a fresh bunch becomes limp and spotted overnight, losing its bright green appearance and fragrant oils. But the damage goes deeper than appearance. Basil's flavor comes from volatile essential oils, such as eugenol and linalool. These compounds give basil its characteristic sweet, peppery aroma, but they deteriorate rapidly in cold, moist conditions. As a result, refrigerated basil loses both its scent and flavor long before it visibly spoils. Instead of refrigerating, treat basil like a fresh bouquet. Trim the stems and place them in a glass of water on your countertop, much like you would with fresh flowers. Keep the leaves above water and loosely cover the top with a plastic bag to maintain humidity without direct moisture. Stored this way, basil can last up to a week while retaining its fragrance and texture. For even longer preservation, consider freezing basil, but not whole. Blanch the leaves for a few seconds, dry them thoroughly, and blend them with a small amount of olive oil. Pour into an ice cube tray and freeze. This preserves the herb's oils and flavor for use in soups, sauces, and dressings later on. No spoilage, no waste. Whether you're garnishing a dish or making a pesto, basil's rich aroma and vibrant flavor are best enjoyed when it's stored and handled correctly, never in the fridge. 3. Avocados, unripe. Avocados are beloved for their creamy texture and nutrient-dense profile. But if you're storing unripe avocados in the fridge, you're sabotaging their ripening process before it even begins. Avocados ripen off the tree, and they require ambient room temperature to do so. Refrigerating them while they're still firm halts the action of ripening enzymes, particularly ethylene, which regulates the softening and flavor development in the fruit. When chilled prematurely, avocados often stay rock-hard for days or weeks, only to suddenly turn brown and mushy on the inside, bypassing that perfect creamy stage altogether. Cold also affects the oil content in avocados, making the flesh grainy instead of smooth. And once the enzymes have been suppressed by cold, even bringing the fruit back to room temperature doesn't always restart the ripening process. You're left with avocados that are bland, gritty, or stringy, a huge letdown when you're aiming for guacamole or avocado toast. So what's the best way to handle them? Keep unripe avocados on the countertop, away from direct sunlight. If you want to speed up the ripening process, place them in a paper bag with a banana or apple, both of which emit ethylene gas that accelerates ripening. Depending on ripeness at purchase, your avocado should soften within 2 to 5 days. Once ripe, that is, slightly soft to the touch, but not squishy, you can move the avocado to the fridge to pause the ripening process for an extra 2 to 3 days. This short cold storage window helps prevent overripening without altering the flavor or texture. If you've already cut your avocado, sprinkle the flesh with lemon or lime juice, cover tightly with plastic wrap or store in an airtight container, and refrigerate for up to 1 day. This helps minimize browning and preserves the creamy consistency. Avoid common storage hacks like leaving the pit in or storing in water. These methods offer limited protection and can even introduce bacteria. Instead, rely on proper timing and temperature to keep your avocados in peak condition. By understanding how avocados ripen and how cold interferes with that process, you can stop wasting money on ruined fruit and start enjoying your avocados at just the right moment. 2. Honey. If you've ever scooped honey straight from the jar and then stuck it in the fridge thinking you're preserving it, you're not alone. But here's the truth. Honey should never be refrigerated. Doing so doesn't just offer no benefit. It actually harms the texture and usability of this naturally long-lasting food. Honey is one of the few foods in the world that never spoils when stored properly. Its low moisture content, high acidity, and antibacterial properties make it naturally resistant to bacteria and mold. That's why archaeologists have discovered jars of honey in ancient Egyptian tombs that were still perfectly edible thousands of years later. However, when you place honey in the refrigerator, the cold causes it to crystallize rapidly. This is a natural process where the glucose in honey separates from water and forms crystals. While crystallized honey is still safe to eat, the gritty texture and grainy consistency make it much less pleasant to use, especially if you're trying to drizzle it on toast or stir it into tea. And the colder the storage, the faster that crystallization happens. In fact, refrigeration is the #1 cause of honey hardening prematurely. Once crystallized, honey becomes thick, cloudy, and more difficult to scoop or pour. If your honey does crystallize, don't throw it out. Gently warm the jar in a bowl of warm water, never boiling, and stir until smooth again. But to avoid this problem in the first place, store honey at room temperature, ideally in a sealed glass jar, in a cupboard or pantry away from sunlight and moisture. Also, avoid storing honey in the fridge after opening. It doesn't extend shelf life and only increases the chances of unpleasant texture changes. Whether you use it for sweetening drinks, soothing sore throats, or baking, keeping honey at room temperature ensures it stays smooth, golden, and ready to use whenever you need it. 1. Bananas. Last on the list, and possibly the most frequently refrigerated fruit, is the banana. Whether it's to slow ripening, avoid fruit flies, or make them last longer, many people place bananas in the fridge without realizing that cold storage disrupts their natural ripening process, often irreversibly. Bananas are a tropical fruit and extremely sensitive to cold. When exposed to refrigerator temperatures, usually around 35 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, 1 to 4 degrees Celsius, they undergo chilling injury. This starts with the peel turning an unappealing grayish-black or brown, often within just 24 hours. The discoloration doesn't mean the fruit is spoiled, but it's not exactly appetizing either. More importantly, the cold causes the banana's enzymatic activity to shut down. These enzymes are responsible for developing the banana's texture and sweetness as it ripens. So when bananas are refrigerated before they're ripe, the ripening process stalls. You end up with fruit that's green and firm for several days, and then suddenly soft, mushy, and flavorless once removed from the fridge. Even if the peel looks ripe, refrigerated bananas often develop a mealy or watery texture, losing that smooth, creamy consistency they're known for. And once the texture goes, so does the eating experience. So how should you store bananas? Leave them at room temperature on the countertop, away from direct sunlight. If you're trying to slow down ripening, you can separate the bananas from the bunch or wrap the stems in plastic wrap to reduce ethylene gas exposure, which speeds ripening. Once fully ripe, bananas can be placed in the fridge for a day or two, but expect the peel to darken even though the flesh remains usable, especially for smoothies, baking, or freezing. And speaking of freezing, if your bananas are getting too ripe, peel them, cut them into chunks, and freeze in an airtight container. Frozen bananas are perfect for making smoothies, banana ice cream, or soft-baked goods. Understanding the natural behavior of bananas and their reaction to cold will help you enjoy them at their best, sweet, smooth, and full of flavor, without rushing their life cycle or ruining their texture.